Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Wonderful to have you back on series 3 of our webinar, Implementation and Maintenance of Passive Fire Protection System, which is less spoken in India. That's why we chose this topic. And I'm happy to see, 3 or 4 people raising their hand. The purpose of raising hand is to allow you to speak to the speaker, that is Abhishek. Give your suggestion, ideas, if you have any doubt on that, but be specific to passive fire only. Okay, today topic is all about maintenance of passive fire, which we never heard. We spoke a lot about maintenance of active fire, maintenance of fire alarm, maintenance of firefighting, maintenance of fire pump, but we never ever heard people talking about maintaining passive fire protection. That is the subject today. I welcome once again. I'm very happy to have our familiar face on the subject, Mr. Abhishek Chabra. I know most of you. I know about Abhishek. However, it's my duty as an organizer to touch upon his profile. I would like to introduce Abhishek. Is an engineer and a postgraduate diploma holder in finance. He has been advocating the need. Oh, sorry, what happened? Missed.
Last slide.
Okay, I'm gonna. Yeah, sorry. Okay, I'm extremely sorry. So Abhishek has been advocating the need for compliance to standards for improved safety and quality across industries for most of the last 2 decades. He has vast experience in promoting conformity assessment in several industries, including consumer electronics, industrial, renewable, and building products across geographies and jurisdictions. He has worked on several standards and codes development initiative, especially with Bureau of Indian Standard, which is BIS, ASTM, UAE Fire and Life Safety Code of Practice and Saudi Standards, Metrology and Quality Organization, SASO. He is a regular speaker at facade and fire safety conferences, workshop by Society of Fire Protection Engineers, insurance industry, and is often invited as a keynote speaker like New Zealand Fire NZ conference. He frequently writes articles for magazines and publication, and is on his note, does a large-scale fire propagation test ensure fire safe cladding? It was published in the Council of Tall Buildings and Urban Habitat, which is CTBUH, headquartered in Chicago. Since the pandemic hit the world, he has been regularly delivering free education and webinar to increase the awareness about conformity mechanism for fire safety, which is passive fire protection, as well as the Saudi Building Code. Along with helping certification body to expand their horizon of business, he also owns and drives a blog in LinkedIn group called Gurus of Testing, Inspection, and Certification. I'll once again repeat, the link to his blog is www.tic Guru. Those who are interested to interact with him and understand his various articles and subject on the passive fire, please log in and follow his blog. It is aimed at expanding the understanding of conformity across the world. This is about our friend Abhishek. Abhishek, welcome you back, and lovely to have you, and wonderful to hear you once again. It's now you and your participant. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Dominic. As always, excited to be here, happy to be here with all good friends, well-wishers, and professionals who have an intent and a desire to make India safer as well as understand about what we talk about passive fire protection. Dominic has already introduced me well enough in great detail, background, all of that. And I think people know me that I'm one of those who's extremely passionate about compliance and have been involved in all sorts of matters related to compliance and conformity. Today is the third and the concluding session for a series that we started 3 months ago, which is to kind of introduce passive fire protection, what passive fire protection is really all about. And today, as the third and the concluding session, we will talk about responsibilities and liabilities, and a lot of concepts which are very practical, which are everyday basis. And I'm also going to run a small poll, just a poll to understand who we are, where we are. And then as a small audience, we are going to have almost a discussive approach, so that towards the end of today's session, which is also the end of the 3-part series, we are in a position that we can move forward. We can take some actions and we can have some discussions after this on how really these 3-part program will be able to drive some change on the ground on a very practical point of view. For people who are joining us for the first time and haven't heard through the earlier series, here is a snapshot of what I talked about in the first session, which was conducted earlier in this year. We started in the month of February, and I introduced what is really passive fire protection in a more practical sense, in an easy to understand sense, and how in India the codes and standards are. What is the current kind of perception in India about implementing passive fire protection and the areas which people should focus at more. And then last month, we entered into a much more interesting session. We had a great participation where we talked very specific to India. And last month, when we did this session, and it is available with the help of Dominic online as well, that I talked about what really standards and codes are, how they are developed, and how I encouraged listeners that if they are keen and interested to come on board in the development process, how the development should be done. And last month, we also focused specifically on a few Indian test methods. We compared the evolution of the IS 3614, which is the standard, which is a specification standard published by BIS about fire doors. And we also talked about some Indian standards which have recently been published for testing of glazing and glazing-based partition systems. And we talked through how certification and listing as a concept is available in India to Indian standards, and how these concepts are used in bits and pieces in India, but are the norm across the world internationally. So with this as a background, which we did in the last 2 sessions, I'm going to jump into and talk about fire accidents and what is the real connection between what happens after a fire accident and how all of us as stakeholders work towards preventing certain things. So we all know that fire accidents do happen, and it is our aim to try and prevent these fire accidents to happen. And there are certain things which are already in place to almost punish people, if I can say, or scare people that if you do certain mistakes, these can be the repercussions. Because anytime there is an accident, any accident, there has been either some mistake on the part of an individual or an organization, or probably a system or a rule that has been brought to place was wrong and it needs correction. So whenever a analysis is done, some or the other things would change. A new law may be written, a new standard may be published. And these three pillars, as you can see, drive this concept that there is a potential liability. So as an example, if and when there is a fire, and if you read the newspapers in India in the last few months, you can read about so many. But what is the repercussion? The repercussion is, on one side, there is a legal repercussion. A set of organizations would get to work and say, as per a given law in the country, who is punishable, and someone should be punished so that in the future, people are deterred from doing it. The next implication is a commercial implication. Certain insurance companies may have lost money, but also there could be fines which could be given out to either contractors, consultants, architectural firms, or sometimes even the building owners, depending on how the root cause analysis of the fire has come to be. And most of all, there is a loss of reputation. So if you have a business entity which is very secure and a building catches fire, then there is a big loss of name saying, well, you know, someone who is supposed to stand for values of fire safety caught fire, or a hotel chain, or a mall, or an airport. So there is a loss of reputation for who was behind it, who was the contractor, who was the consultant, who was the architect, what is it that they did wrong. So we are attempting to understand how fire safety gets driven down, and what is it that, as stakeholders who are part of the construction industry, who are part of the almost the everyday of what happens, how these stakeholders link with each other, and what are the government bodies, the semi-government bodies, the current rules and practices that exist. And as all of you people who have dialed in today, who are listening to me, what is it that we can do as an action, probably from tomorrow morning, that can start changing things? Because all of you now better understand a tool that is available to ensure better fire safety to be in place. So what we have is, we have two very known, very defined tools. We have something called technical specifications of any project, and we have the commercial contract. And I'm very sure all of you at some or the other point of time are aware of what these two are. So before I jump into talking further about it, I want to launch a very quick poll, and I want all the listeners to try and answer this question: that who are you as a stakeholder? People who are listening in today, and I'm not going to move to the next slide till we have almost everybody answer this question, because unlike in the past, somebody would say, well, you know, I don't know, the insurance company, or I am somebody else and I am not represented. But everybody who is listening in is living somewhere. So you are a resident, you are a tenant, you are a user of built environment infrastructure. You all go to offices, live in houses, go to malls, go to airports. So you're also users as well. So before I kind of move forward today and we talk about how various stakeholders can actually drive change and need to drive change. Because the reason why you are spending your valuable time today evening on this topic is because you want to ensure that there is fire safety. You want to ensure that there is change that is happening, and we don't wake up in the morning to see a news about another big fire and loss of life, loss of money, and so much damage to reputation. So I'm going to give you another maybe 10-20 seconds. I want all the people to try and answer this question before I move forward. Another 10 seconds. Come on, the last few people, answer the question. I want everybody to have an answer to this question so that we can have a very interesting discussion towards the end of the session. We know who is where, who are all the people in the audience, because we want to have an understanding of what change we can bring about after what we have understood from the first session and the last session about passive fire protection. Anybody left to answer the poll question? There are a few people who are still waiting, saying, we don't want to answer. Come on, who's the tenant? I can see that there is a good percentage of people who are in the audience who are, in advisory function, a consultant or a fire consultant or so. So I'm going to end this poll now, and I don't know if I can share the results. Maybe anyone in the audience who can see the percentage of people who have answered? Maybe a quick reply on the chat. Yes, fantastic. Thank you, Saif. So I'm going to move forward now, and thank you to all the listeners who have answered the poll question, because I want to drive an understanding of what is the relationship between the stakeholders. And what you see on your screen is almost a rough kind of representation. There are other people who are in the industry, who are involved in the construction industry, stakeholders. But this slide is going to give you a rough idea of what I'm trying to convey. So we start with some stakeholders like architects or designers or consultants, contracting companies who are trying to woo the developer or the owner or the investor who is going to create a building or create an infrastructure, any infrastructure. So this is what I call, the first level of marketing, or people saying, choose me as the architect or choose me as the consultant. And of course, everybody's trying to woo the source of money, because at the end of it, it is all about commerce. The second tier is also worth knowing and understanding, that we have the contracting companies who want to be chosen as the contractor for a job, right? So they are trying to woo the developer or the client, but they're also marketing to the consultant and the architect, because it is the combination. They all have to work together. They have to like each other. And then we have the hard job of material suppliers and material manufacturers. And I know about 9-10% of the people in the audience today is material sellers, because they have to get their name out. They want the architects, the specifiers to know their material, what all they offer. They want the contracting companies to be able to order them. They want the specialist consultants to know what these materials are. So now with this kind of an understanding that the audience has about the relationship, who is trying to advertise to who is trying to sell to whom, is when we shift to the next stage of understanding that where does the money really flow? Who pays whom? The owner, the developer, the architect, the investor typically would pay the architectural firm, would pay a consultant, would pay a contracting company. And it is the contractor who will pay to the material seller. And this relationship, please freeze this image in your mind, because this is a very key image to understand that where is the liability really flowing from? Because in essence, who is the commercial entity who builds? The commercial entity who builds the building is the contracting company. It is the contracting company who will procure materials, who will hire subcontractors to use these materials and build. And this is done as per a framework, as per a specification document, which is usually has inputs from the architect, from the consultant, from the specialist consultants. And I'm not talking of project management companies. And this is just core relationship. So the contractor has a liability which is limited. He will build as per what he was asked to build. So what is being asked to build, defined in technical specifications, has to be clear and concise. And if those specifications are wrong, then the liability, the responsibility, and the fine will go to ones who have been involved in generating them, creating them, or even paying for getting the specifications made. And on the other side, you have the material suppliers who are claiming, I have a 1-hour fire rated door. All the doors that I will supply to the project will be 1-hour fire rated. Well, are they correct or not? And this is where it is the responsibility of the contractor to buy what is claimed to perform. With this relationship matrix that I have defined, and I hope you have all kind of understood, you can give me a quick thumbs up in the chat if you're following me, or say, hey, I don't understand. I'm going to shift gears to what we always talk about, which is fire protection. And I'm hoping many of you have already attended the previous sessions and kind of understand where does passive fire protection really sit. So I'm going to walk through some examples so that the audience is kind of with me and you are following me when I try to drive down the relationship between stakeholders, between people like yourselves and others, and how things can change and should change. What you see on your screen, I would like you to kind of take a close look at the screen. And what do you see? You see a plan, which I pulled off 99 Acres website. It's probably a plan of a residential floor. And I've also pulled out another image that you can see probably on the corner right of your screen to try and make you understand and imagine what I'm talking of. So we have a flow, we have a plan. This is a plan of probably 2 houses on a flow. And what I've tried to build is in a purple line. I hope you can see the purple line on the screen, to create a boundary. And this boundary defines the compartment. It is a proposed concept. It depends, of course, on the fire consultant, who would say what is the occupancy type, what is the type of building, and ensure the correct design of the fire safety concept called compartmentalization. And what this means is that if in this house, on this floor, a fire gets initiated, the purple lines around will ensure that the compartmentalization is maintained, which means that the fire will remain right here. It will not go to the next house or the floor above or the floor below. It will be contained within this compartment for maybe 30 minutes or 2 hours or 3 hours, enough time for the building to be evacuated, for the fire tenders to come in and save the rest of the residents at least. And hence, owing to the occupancy type, the compartment is designed. And if you look at the image on the bottom right on your screens, you can probably better imagine this compartment, which is an image of an office floor. And you can see there are some doors of cabins which need not maintain a compartment. They are non-fire rated doors, non-fire rated partitions. But the boundary of the office, whether it's glazed or any other type of boundary system, it needs to contain the fire. I hope this is clear, but I'm going to go one step further in getting into passive fire protection and a concept less understood. So if you see this image now on the bottom left, you can see a lot of services. So you can see pipes coming out. You can see the chimney of a kitchen floor. You see the boundaries of where the through penetrations are coming from. And now all of these mechanical, electrical, plumbing, MEP works, as they are also called, are potential destroyers. With no offense, but what I mean to say is there is a compartment that has been created, that has been designed, that has been built, and this compartment needs to be cut open to allow the services to come in and out. And then it has to be resealed. So this action, which I explained in one of my presentations, usually MEP works is about 35% of the budget. So the money spent, about 35% of the whole contract, these subcontractors can potentially derail all of the compartmentalization done. So it needs to be done properly. And just to give you an idea or a spread of how much this is, here is another image for you to just absorb and understand that right above the false ceiling that you often don't see in offices, in malls, in commercial buildings, and even residential high-rise buildings, is this jal, is this web of pipes and HVAC ducts and electrical fittings and cable trays, which many of you, by the way, are very aware of it. But it is important to know and understand that they all need to be done correctly. And what is it that all of you must know and understand? That it is being done correctly. And it is not just the haggling of the contract and the matter is over. Going back, quick revision to one of the older slides, fire resistance of a partition or a fire door could be tested in the laboratory, and you can all refer back to older sessions of how fire testing is done. But point to know and remember is what all makes up this compartment. Fire doors, boards, hardware, through penetration, fire stopping, all of these elements need to be correctly procured. And to be correctly procured, they need to be correctly specified in the contract with a commercial value attached to not specifying it correctly or specifying it correctly. And the same goes for installation and a mechanism in place to make sure that this installation is correct. So all these stakeholders or many others that you are aware are always bound by specifications and contracts. The technical definition of boundary of what you want to buy. Is it a product? Is it a service? And how that product or service is defined and what is the money attached to it. So let's talk very specific about certain stakeholders and the relationship between them. And I know that we have a good percentage of these stakeholders who are in the audience today. Let's start with the contract. Who has a contract with whom? the owners or the developers would definitely have a contract with the contracting company. They could be the same entity as well. This is depending on the type of organization. The contractor will have a contract with the material suppliers, which means it places an order on them, and there is a definition of what is being placed as an order on them. The owner of the building, it could be the resident, it could be the tenant probably, has a contract with the facility management company or someone who is taking care of renovation and change. Someone will come and say, well, the pipe is broken, this needs to be done again. I need to punch a hole and run a pipe again. Wait a minute, does this company know what they're doing? As an example. There is also a contract between labs and certification bodies like ourselves and material suppliers. Now, there could also be certain other contracts, like fire consultants may or may not always be hired. A fire consultant, specialist fire consultant could be hired by an architect or a designer or a consultant. In many projects, owners just hire a contractor and get the work done. There is no consultant that is hired, but in several projects, the developer or the owner will reach out to an architect or the designer or the consultant. So if you see these red dotted lines, these relationship exists because potentially there is a function involved. There is another entity I'm bringing forth, which is often not thought about, is inspection bodies. These are third-party inspection bodies, independent inspection bodies. These are not the consultants or the architects who are doing an inspection. And there is a reason why I bring this out, and this should be understood by people in the audience. If the developer is paying money to a contractor and is paying money to the consultant to inspect the work and will not get paid if the work gets late and if the work does not get finished. Or if you ask the contractor to inspect the work of the subcontractor, then the contractor does not get paid if the work is not finished quickly by the subcontractor. So there is no motivation for the contractor to say, hey, this is done wrong, break and do again. No, he will lose the money. So in many jurisdictions, the independent inspection body is actually hired by the developer or the owner. And in some countries like Singapore or many others, they're actually hired by the authority having jurisdiction. So the fire department or the municipality hires certain inspection bodies to do a thorough inspection of the fire safety features. It is important to know and understand impartiality and who will make sure that the work gets delivered properly. Just to give you an idea, the architect, designer, or consultant, that this could be wrong. It's just kind of an approximate thing, that they are responsible to create the correct technical specifications, and it should be known what is the limitation of their liability. So if you are the owner or a developer, I see 10% people in the audience, and you are hiring a consultant, an architect, or a specialist consultant or a designer, make sure that the contract defines the liability. What is the liability? What is not the liability? Maybe a fire consultant is hired, and if it is hired, make sure the liabilities are defined. What is the responsibility? Because you're paying them. The contractor, again, has usually the most of the liability, but also has a very easy way out to say that, well, whatever we were asked to do, we did. And the responsibility goes back to the technical specifications or the laws in the jurisdiction, etc. The liability of the manufacturers, which is often considered high, is actually limited to just what they claimed their product will do. And they also have a very easy way out, which is saying that, well, it was installed correctly by the subcontractor and hence it did not work. And hence it is important to make sure that this door is closed. The facility management company, I have nothing against them, but some facility management companies could probably destroy all the fire and life safety if they do not know what they're doing. And hence it is important to understand that the contract, which is there with the FM company, does not kill all the money that has been spent to make sure fire safety exists. Again, companies like ourselves, testing laboratory or a certification body, have limitations. If I create a test report for a manufacturer, the test report only says how it performed. My favorite example is the blood test that you do every day to test sugar, for example, some of us who do. Well, it's just a spot check. So a fire door or a partition or a carpet coming to the laboratory which is tested, that is how that performed. What is coming on your site is where certification comes in and the traceability comes in, and that traceability needs to be checked by the contractor, needs to be checked by the inspection body. Otherwise, so let's move to an example of a fire door from a very practical point of view, the way it would ideally get done internationally. For example, if it's a large commercial building, the floor plan designed will have the fire and life safety plan, lots of things. Let's talk specifically about compartmentalization. Depending on the type of occupancy, the compartmentalization is designed, 2 hours compartment needed as an example. So all the fire doors on that compartment across the floors will be specified to be 2 hours. And this leads to what is called a door schedule. And the door schedule is the master document for the contractor to roll out an RFP saying, bid to me that you comply, that you are a 2-hour fire rated door. And this is where the responsibility of the contractor comes in. What evidence do you really rely on? Is it a test report where you have no way probably to cross-check what was tested and what you're buying? Or is it certification and listing where there is an online portal to verify how the certified product looks like, what all it contains, and the same can be inspected with the help of a fire door label or any kind of a label to make sure that it is correct or not. And we can discuss about this. For those, this is just a quick revision that what certification and listing really provides. It is a cyclic process where the third-party entity, which is a certification body, and this could be a company like Thomas Bell Wright, it could be a company like FM or UL or one of so many, who takes on the responsibility of maintaining an online checking portal where you can verify that if a product carries a certification mark, then it will ensure that it will comply to certain standards. Where is it manufactured? And it is something which is inspectable, which means, for example, if it is a fire door, which is claiming to comply to IS 3614 as an example, then there exists an online mechanism to verify that the factory is being audited regularly to make sure that it is manufacturing the product and it can be inspected when it is installed. And I want to very quickly show you that inspection as a concept is a legal requirement. It is part of codes in America, in the UAE. It is part of the code and it is legislated that how the inspection should be done, what all things that need to be checked. And in many countries, inspection is mandated every year. And there are some excellent inspection standards. classic example is the NFPA 80, which is a standard for fire doors and any other opening protectives. And all sorts of openings are not only defined that how they should be inspected, but also responsibilities of retrofitting inspection, etc. are defined in this standard, because things actually go wrong. If you see at the images on the top right, the three images where you can see a fire door whose closer has been removed, or my favorite, the second image on the top that you see here, where the fire doors is actually installed as skewed. The installation is wrong, or hinges are gone. And there are so many things that can potentially go wrong. And in countries, internationally, in all the other countries, there is a requirement of how inspection bodies are controlled. Inspection bodies like ourselves and so many others, we are audited by accreditation bodies on being able to do the inspection correctly. So once a year, there is a third-party expert who will chase my auditor in the field and check how is he checking or she checking a fire door being installed correctly or a through penetration being installed correctly. And mind you, there are ways to check. You must have seen, some of you would have seen this in the past from my slides, that something like an aluminum composite panel, ACP, which does catch fire, you can go to the site. There is traceability. Companies like Viva, who are in India, and many others who have companies like Everest, and there are quite a few. You can look them up on our certification directory. Their products in the field will carry a certification number. And if it does not, then it is not part of the product which gets inspected. And you should not give it the premium that it is asking you, right? So here's another poll question. Let me see if there is, if I can find this question. This is a very, very quick poll question that I want to open, because I'm hoping all the stakeholders kind of did understand what I am talking of. So I want to know how many people in the audience have some capability to drive some change. Just asking the right questions. Because even if you are capable of asking the right questions, things start to change. Just as an authority having jurisdiction, if you check that, does a fire door have a label? Who has installed it? Who is taking the responsibility of installation, etc.? It is when you ask these questions is when you start driving the change. If you have to buy any product and you ask the right questions, the salesperson would know, well, oh, I cannot give him the regular spiel. I have to get my senior who will be able to answer the right questions. So here's almost like a quick list of questions that you should know or you can ask to make sure. I'm going to answer some of the questions. I see questions are popping up. So what is the traceability of products? Any product which is driving fire safety in a building, these stakeholders who are able to answer these questions or should ask these questions, that what is the traceability of the product? And more importantly, how is it should be installed? You should ask for compliance evidence, whether they are test reports or certification and listing, and make sure that if you are the buyer, if you are the specifier, you are specifying accurate requirements and you are linking these requirements with commercial clauses all these stakeholders touch with this question. Installation, the most critical and the least important, unfortunately, in most of the cases. Who is installing? Is it as per the manufacturer's guidelines? Who is taking the liability of an incorrect installation? Is it linked with the commercial value? Is the subcontractor fined or agreed that he is liable if the installation is wrong, if there is a fire? Who is responsible? Are you taking the services of an inspection body? And mind you, the moment you hire an inspection body, they are a party to the liability because they are making sure that the installation is correct or not. Who is maintaining the product? Who is giving the warranties? Are the FM companies aware or not aware? All these questions need to be addressed when technical specifications are being written, the contract is being written. And here is a quick guide of some of the terms that you can see, and I'm sure Dominic will make this available because this is getting recorded, is that what is the listing reference? What is the kind of certification you need? Do you need certification labels? Do you need a testing done by anybody or an accredited laboratory, someone who knows what testing is being done? Whose responsibility it is? What is the responsibility of the contractor? What is the responsibility of the manufacturer? What is the responsibility of the certification body? Are all these things lined up with documentation or not? Are there stage payments linked with these requirements, with performance guarantees, with penalties? Are the penalty clauses there or not? So I leave you with this. This is the last slide for today's session. And I'm going to read some of the questions and I'm going to open the floor for questions. And for all those people who haven't really heard about us, who we are a 26-year-old company based in Dubai. We have been doing curtain wall mock-up testing in our lab since 27 years, supporting the crazy construction industry in the Gulf, people who want everything now. Since over a decade, we have been doing fire testing, small-scale reaction to fire tests for interior finishing material, fire resistance tests. We now have 4 fire resistance furnaces. We are the largest laboratory in terms of capacity and capability from Morocco to Bangladesh. We do a lot of small-scale tests, reaction to fire tests, and we also do a lot of large-scale fire tests to validate the performance of cladding, building exterior, facades, and we are also a certification and listing body, just like companies like UL or others, but we are probably the only international certification body who can offer a listing to Indian standards. And I talked about this in the past, and I have one of my colleagues, Vinayak, who's based in Mumbai, who is available at any time if you have any questions. And for all the people who are in the audience, I want to share a PDF file, and you can download this PDF file from the chat. This PDF file talks about the Indian standards that we are offering certification and listing to. Over to you, Dominic. I'm going to read through some of the questions. Have some water now.
Thank you, Abhishek. Lovely to clarify many doubts that you may have in mind. And thank you for sharing the PDF on the Indian standard that is there. I'm sure people are downloading that. And what I did is now is there are people who are waiting to interact with you. You are more celebrity in India on this subject. So we take 3 hands and 1 question. So we will move to, we have Tara.
So let me quickly just answer 1 or 2 questions and see if there are people who have written down questions and try and answer some of them. And then let's step by step, we'll take, we'll talk to people and we'll listen to people and have a discussion who have been raising hands. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Vilas Vadhone, who wanted a difference between active and fire passive, I hope that question was answered. It was answered live, and you can refer to some of the older sessions that were there. Jaiveer wanted a question which seems to be out of syllabus for me. What is the best way to maintain firefighting equipment, vehicle, and systems? I'm sorry, Jaiveer. This question is out of syllabus for me. And the same what Ashok Dhingra ji is asking, is there any fireproof uniform for firemen? I would not be able to answer this question. And there is an anonymous question which I am not going to answer, because if they want to ask, they should ask with their name. Manish wanted to know how to ensure passive fire installation is correctly and properly installed. And absolutely, I talked about inspections, Manish. There are inspection standards, and they are accredited inspection bodies who do these inspections, and they have set routines that fire doors, as an example, need to be inspected every year in some cases. And Ramakant wanted to know what legal action for non-compliance. And Ramakant, this is an excellent question. I've been wanting to answer this question, waiting for someone to ask this. Ramakant asks, what is the legal action for non-compliance? And there are two legal actions, very straight and very clear. The first legal action comes out of the contract. So if there is a contract between two commercial entities saying, I want to buy this specified like this. So if you specify compliance, then you are paying for compliance. And if the compliant product is not delivered, the contract is void, and the Ministry of Commerce, and there are several legal clauses in the Indian legal system that allow you this. And the second comes from those jurisdictions in India who have enacted a fire law adopting a given code. So if the National Building Code of India has been adopted in the Fire Act of, let's say, Maharashtra, then they are calling for it, and legal action can be taken on the basis of the law which enacts the use of the code. So that answers the questions. Dominic, over to you. I'll let you open the mic and let me face some of the difficult unknown questions then.
Anyway, Ravi, can you unmute? Ravi wanted to, and this question should be only on the passive fire protection and more related testing. So Ravi, if you're listening to me, you can unmute and interact with Abhishek, please.
Go ahead, Ravi, unmute, and please do introduce yourself so that I know which Ravi am I talking to.
Okay, Vilas, if you're there, if you're listening, probably you can unmute. Yeah.
You can hear me, sir?
Yes, Vilas, how are you?
I'm fine, sir. Thanks. Sir, I want to know what kind of specification for ceiling or flooring would be there in case of passive fire protection. Because if you see the World Trade Center, whole floor got caved in because of the heat, because this metallic structure will start expanding and give away from the joint. So is there any specification for ceilings and flooring?
Vilas, where are you from? Like, what is your background? Who are you, if I can please ask?
Okay, I retired from. I was with NOSIL. I was factory manager there.
Okay, so
and I started doing some consultations work now.
Very nice, Vilasji. The thing is that there are two separate requirements. So there is a flame spread or combustibility requirement for any and every flooring. Okay. There are test methods for this, that the flame spread on the interior finishing, and there are unique testing methods which are used very specifically for testing flooring material. Whether these flooring materials are carpets, or whether these are false flooring or decking, or these are flooring coatings that are available. So all such flooring materials, they can potentially be tested. There are There is a test method I'm just sharing on my screen as well. It is called the critical radiant flux test method. It is used for flooring and floor coverings. There are also what are called movement joints and sealants, which are put in on movement joints. So, for example, flooring of airports or hospitals or whatever, where there is a sealant which is put in between the movement joint, and there are compliance requirements for these as well. I hope that answers the question, Vilas.
Can I add one?
Thank you, Vilas. One question per person, so we have many. Okay. So, Tara Dal, are you there? Yeah.
Yes. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Tara.
I am architect Tara Dhal from Odisha. So
Nice.
we are basically doing many hospital projects for governments.
Okay.
And basically we are following National Building Code 2016.
Very
and
nice.
there is no fire act in Odisha. There is no proper legislation of for the compounding for the losses due to fire.
Very
The fire
nice.
occurs, after that there is investigation, then they throw some responsibility upon somebody.
Correct.
So we are directly following 2016. There is no legislation over there. There is a guideline only.
Right.
We are writing the contract, writing the specification as per NBC, giving the drawings to the fire department for their initial approval. Then after their approval, we go for detailed estimate, the contract conditions. After that, it is tendered. It is tendered by the executing agency like say PWD or any executing like agency like any corporation. After that, the subcontract is being fixed. The subcontractor again gives subcontract to somebody who is doing the firework. And finally, the project is being handed over. But the real problem starts after 5-7 years when there is leakage in current, when there is extra voltage or due to fire due to any electrical short circuit or something like that. But this has been a regular phenomenon with government buildings so far hospital is concerned. After listening to you, all the slides, what advice you should give it to us to safeguard our professional interests?
Really, very, very good, very apt question, Tara, and I'm sure this is not just your pain point. The hospital fires in India are something that nobody is happy about. So let me answer your question very specifically, and you gave me all the information I need to answer the question. First of all, Tara, as an entity who is the designer or the specifier, there are two things that you can do. First of all, to make sure that things drive change and it's better. One, there are lots of international codes and guidelines which are published, whether it is NFPA codes and guidelines or International Building Code or IBC from the United States, who are very, very evolved when it comes to hospital infrastructure or various types of hospital infrastructure. So you are talking of separate guidelines for smaller clinics, separate guidelines for multi-speciality hospitals, separate guidelines for general hospitals, and extremely good detailing about what all, Tara, that should be factored in and needs to be factored in. And I would point and encourage you and anybody who is responsible for designing or writing specifications of hospitals to keep these in mind. So this is number one. And number two, you have a contract to design these, and you must enlist your liabilities, saying, as long as all of these things are done, I am exempt from the liability. And if anything changes, if the contractor is not doing their job or is not following my specification, I should be absolved from any liability. And the moment you write this line specifically saying, I am not liable for anything if it is not done correctly, then you have safeguarded your interest as well as brought to the public attention of procurers whether it is the likes of CPWD or PWD or whoever, that they are taking on the liability by changing some things. So I hope that kind of answers your questions. You have my email address and contact. Feel free to write to me and I can kind of guide you. I must say, we are not a fire consultant. I am not a fire consultant. It's just a conformity body. But I know a lot of people who are in this swim and who could probably guide you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tara. Mayank, Ravi, are you there? Can I remove you from the screen here? If you are there, if you're listening, please unmute and speak. Ravi. Okay, Mayank, are you there? Okay, move on to Arichandani, who's regular to our webinars. Arichandani, are you there? Can you listen to me? Okay, let's move to questions, Abhishek. Is there anything that I can see that chat box? There are a couple of questions that is coming in.
Okay, I'll have to look up the chat box. Good evening. Good evening. Thank you. Can I ask whoever has put a question to put it in Q&A? I don't know where the questions are. Dominic, if you find the question, then you can probably put it back in the chat box. It's a long chat box.
The question.
Any future plan to push the product in government sectors?
Okay, Neeraj, are you there? Can you listen to me? Ashok Rane, you can speak. Okay, Ashok Rane is not there. Then we have Karma. Mr. Karma, are you there? Do you want to talk?
Yes, it is. I'm here. I'm from Bhutan.
Yeah, please.
Hello, Karma. Hello. Very nice to connect.
Thank you. But every day, whatever program you are organizing, I'm always there. But today is the good opportunity for me to speak regarding about fire.
Nice.
I think.
Thank you.
Is there any precaution regarding about the fire other than fire alarm and fire extinguisher and such thing?
Well, Karma, as you must have seen some of the earlier sessions also, we have two methods or strategies. One is active fire. Active fire does detect and control, which is like smoke detectors, alarms, fire extinguishers. And the second is passive fire protection, which does containment and limitation of spread. And these two things should be imagined like the seat belt and the brake in the car. They are both for safety, but both are important to save lives. So there has to be a balance between active and passive. And I welcome you to send out an email to me. You have my email addresses. And I would love to have a one-to-one call to help sometimes, and we can schedule that. All right, that's the last question.
Yeah, there's a question from Mukesh Mulchandani. On what basis fire withstanding rating is specified? So Mukesh Mulchandani is asking, on what basis fire withstand rating is specified, duration?
Sure, Mukesh, this is a good question. I get this question a lot. There are a few factors which jointly kind of answer this question. One is the occupancy type, which means what is the real type of building and potential risk. So, for example, a commercial building, a hospital, a residential building, etc. They are all different types of buildings, which means that the readiness of people inside the building is different. Their awareness about fire safety is different. So the time which is set for containment of fire is defined by the type of occupancy, how long they may take to evacuate, how many people could there be who need to be evacuated, and how far away the fire tender could be. And several other factors, these are just some, which all come together, and a fire code is published. In certain jurisdictions where there is a higher access and assurance of sprinkler systems, for example, or other means which will ensure that the fire can be controlled, then the rating requirement in hours sometimes gets downgraded or reduced because there is an alternative mechanism that can ensure that fire can be contained. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. Abhishek, if you want to pick up anything.
Perfect.
5 more.
Perfect. I think we've picked up most of the questions, and anything which was not in Q&A and is probably in the chat, then feel free to reach out to Vinayak. You can see Vinayak's number on your screens, as well as you can feel free to call me or send an email to me, and I will be absolutely happy to help. I think this has been a great session and a great series, which has been designed by Dominic. A big thank you to Dominic for kind of getting us all together. And absolutely thrilled that I have been able to add value to the listeners, and anybody who is not been able to reach me or get an answer, feel free to reach to me. And yeah, have a very, very good weekend.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your wishes and greetings. And now Vinayak, based out of Mumbai, he is here. He's good experienced personality, and he will be here to help us on behalf of Thomas Bell Wright. And as Abhishek said, we will have a very interactive session coming soon. Passive fire safety pe charcha. This is something which now got into my mind, and you'll have multiple personalities from India on various subjects. We could have 1.5 sessions, just no presentation, just a question answer,
just charcha.
Yeah, just charcha karenge. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Weekend, and this entire video presentations will be given to you, will be shared on the mail, and it will be available on YouTube. Thank you so much. God bless you all. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, and bye-bye, everybody.